Chasing the sun, take a long way around, back to square one. Today we're just outlaws out on the run. There'll be no regrets, no worries and such. Cowboys like us.
Hey, fourth graders. Welcome back. My name is Mrs. Lawson. So glad you're here today. If my music didn't give it away, today we're talking about cowboys. So that made me think about country music. So I just had to get a little bit in there for you guys. So we are starting a new story today called Pecos Bill. If you've never heard of it, that's okay. But we're still talking about different legends and tall tales because they explain to us, so the legends we just talked about explain nature. Now, tall tales are also stories that are passed down. So we're starting one that is actually from here in America. Learning intentions today, we are learning to determine the theme of a story using details in the text. And we know we are successful when we can define what theme is, refer back to details in the text, and identify the theme of the story. Now, before I tell you what it is, do you remember what theme is? Did you say the message or lesson that the author wants you to take away from the story? Good job. That's what I was hoping. And remember, those key questions that we're asking ourselves is, what did the characters learn and how did they grow? So today's foundational skill, we're still working with those compound words. And if we look at the words that they gave us today, what are the two words that you see here? Cowboy. Right, you see cow and boy. And it means it's a boy or a man maybe that works with cows. What about over here? Horseshoe. Horseshoes. Yeah, it's the shoes that go on a horse. So it's what they put on the bottom of their hooves. I think that's what they call them, the bottom of their feet. So those help us understand what those words mean. Good job, fourth graders. Go back to my mouse here. So our foundational skill for today is, oh my goodness, I didn't put it in there. You're going to be reading a story, and it'll be a seesaw assignment that you can work on those compound words. So there's some by the way words that you're going to need to know today because this isn't going to be like any of the stories you've read before. And you'll notice that when Miss Lawson gets to reading. So you're going to hear the word feller today. And that's a term for the word fellow, which is kind of the same as man or boy. Then another word that we need to know today is varmint. It's an informal term, so for a predatory animal that is considered a pest. So it's a pest, an animal that's a bother. Then up here, what could this word mean? It is desolate. So over here, we've got pictures that go with it. And from the story, it says, as they clatter across the desolate land of western Texas, the crushing heat nearly drove them all crazy. So what do you think desolate means? Hopefully you said deserted of people and kind of empty or bare, because you can tell from those pictures it's pretty bare out there. Now we're going to start reading a little bit about the background of Pecos Bill if you've never heard of him. So yarns about Pecos Bill. He is the greatest cowpuncher ever known on either side of the Rockies, from Texas through Montana and on into Canada. It first appeared in a 1923 Century magazine. The author of the piece, Edward O'Reilly, wrote the saga of Pecos Bill by combining a number of Western folklore episodes with the boastful, comic, tall tale language of heroes such as Davy Crockett and Paul Bunyan. After O'Reilly invented the character of Pecos Bill, many others revised and expanded upon the yarns in dozens of books, articles, poems, recordings, and plays. Pecos Bill seemed to capture the spirit of an earlier America, wild, untamed, and unsocialized. He even added an occasional note of his own brand of recklessness to stories about other tall tale characters as well. In an original Feebled-Feebleson story, Feebled and Pecos Bill have a shootout. And in a Paul Bunyan anthology, Pecos Bill teaches Paul how to ride a streak of lightning. This tale about Pecos Bill was derived from the O'Reilly saga, as well as a number of other retellings. This kind of gives us some background on him and where this story came from. Wonder what this picture's showing us. What in the world's going on there? So, this is a cowboy story, so my voice, gotta get ready. Ask any coyote near the Pecos River in western Texas who was the best cowboy who ever lived, and he'll throw back his head and howl, "Ah-oo!" If you don't know already, that's coyote language for Pecos Bill. When Pecos Bill was a little baby, he was tough as a pine knot. He teethed on a horseshoe instead of teething rings and played with grizzly bears instead of a teddy bear. He could have grown up just fine in the untamed land of eastern Texas. But one day his pappy ran in from the fields hollering, "Pack up, Ma. Neighbor's moving in 50 miles away. It's getting too overcrowded. It's getting too crowded." Before sundown, Bill's folks loaded their 15 kids and all their belongings into their covered wagon and started west. So, why does his family leave the land? It says right here, they lived in the untamed lands. So right now we definitely live in untamed, and we live in tamed lands because there's buildings, we built on it, we've taken control of it. If you're out in the country, it's more of like what it was before we got here. So that's untamed. So they lived kind of more out in the country. And it says right here, they have neighbors moving in 50 miles away. You realize driving from Topeka, it's like an hour away before you drive 50 miles. And that was too close for them. So that's kind of crazy. So he was really nervous that more and more people were coming, I think, and was going to crowd their land and take their land. So that was why his family decided to leave. So on this page, we're going to try and focus on maybe Pecos Bill. If he becomes a cowboy, do we think he'll lose his animal traits? So something happens on this page. As they clattered across the desolate land of western Texas, the crushing heat nearly drove them all crazy. Baby Bill got so hot and cross that he began to wallop his big brothers. Pretty soon, all 15 kids were going at one another tooth and nail. Before they turned each other into catfish bait, Bill fell out of the wagon and landed kerplop on the sun-scorched desert. The others were so busy fighting that they didn't even notice the baby was missing until it was too late to do anything about it. Well, tough little Bill just sat there in the dirt, watching his family rattle off in a cloud of dust until an old coyote walked over and sniffed him. "Goo goo," Bill said. Now, it's an amazing coincidence, but "goo goo" happens to mean something similar as "glad to meet ya" in coyote language. Naturally, the old coyote figured he came across one of his own kind. He gave Bill a big lick and picked him up by the scruff of the neck and carried him home to his den. Bill soon discovered the coyote's kinfolk were about the wildest, roughest bunch you could imagine. Before he knew it, he was roaming the prairies with the pack. He howled at the moon, sniffed the brush, and chased lizards across the sand. He was having such a good time scuttling about naked and dirty on all fours that he completely forgot what it was like to be a human. Pecos Bill's coyote days came to an end about 17 years later. One evening, as he was sniffing the sagebrush, a cowpoke was loping by on a big horse. "Hey, you!" he shouted. "What in the world are you?" Bill sat on his haunches and stared at the feller. "What are you?" said the cowpoke again. "Varmint," said Bill hoarsely, for he hadn't used his human voice in 17 years. All right, guys. So what do you think? If he does become a cowboy, or like as they say, a cowpoke here, do you think he's going to give up his animal ways? It says up here, he soon discovered that they were rowdy, and he was roaming the prairie with them. He was howling at the moon. And then down here it says he completely forgot he was a human until 17 years later. So he spent 17 years being a coyote. Do you think that's all just going to go away? Probably not, right? He might change a little bit, but if you're doing that for 17 years, some of it's going to stick with you, right? Oh man, that's all we're reading today. Ugh, I always get so into these, I get so sad when we run out. So again, we're talking about theme today. So it says, according to the notes on page 51, why is Pecos Bill a popular character in American folklore? So folklore is like stories that we pass down, kind of like legends. So why is he an important character? Why is he popular? Let's go look back. Let's read this paragraph. I'll give you a few seconds to look for yourself. So right here it says, many other revised and expanded upon this in dozens of books, articles, poems, and plays. So he seemed to capture the spirit of an earlier America, wild, untamed, and unsocialized. So that's what drew people to him. He's kind of crazy, kind of wild, and people like seeing that. So let's go look back at that question. Make sure we're answering it all the way. Oops. So why is he popular? So why do people like him? What do they see in him? Yeah, I agree. So if you see someone that's being wild and carefree, like they're just out there being themselves, that's kind of cool, right? So I think people like to read about Pecos Bill because he feels okay just being himself, being raised by coyotes. He's like, this is who I am, right? And I think also people like not having to live by all the rules, right? We just learned about how the stars fell into the sky. First woman thought how important rules were. I think sometimes people like to pretend like it's fun not to have rules, right? So that's something to think about too. All right, now it's your turn. For your reading response today, how does Pecos Bill see himself? So let's pop back really quick, actually. Right here, let's look at the other human in the story, this cowpoke that comes up. Right here, his coyote days came to an end about 17 years later. As he was sniffing the sagebrush, a cowpoke came loping by on a big horse. So we can tell he's a human because he's sitting on another horse, right? He goes, "Hey, you, what in the world are you?" And then Bill is sitting on his haunches. So he's down on all fours and he's looking up at him, right? And the guy's like, asks him again, "What in the world are you?" And then for the first time in 17 years, Bill uses his voice. Kind of crazy. And then I wanted to look back at these pictures. Now we know that this is Pecos Bill right here, right? And this is his coyote family. And then this is him playing with that bear, right? All right, so your reading response today is, how does he see himself? Is he A, strong and dedicated to his work? B, happy and content with how his life is going? C, he sees himself as an animal? Or D, a cowboy dedicated to his family? How do you know your answer? Once you pick A, B, C, or D, how do you know? And go back and find evidence from the text. All right, guys, good job today. I had so much fun reading about cowboys and Pecos Bill with you, and I will see you next time. Bye.